Today on the Commanders Report, we have our 2024 NFC East Division preview here. As Commanders fans, we talk about the Commanders every single day here on the channel. So you guys pretty much know how I feel about this year's Washington Commanders football team. But what about the other teams in the division? Are they getting better? Are they getting worse? What can we expect from the Cowboys, Eagles, and Giants this year? Today, I'm going to answer those questions and break down all three of the division rivals for your Washington Commanders. But before we get into it today, let me know down there in the comments section and predict it. Who is going to win the NFC East this season? Again, there hasn't been a repeat champion since 2004, all right? So keep that in mind here as we take a look at the 2023 standings. Of course, it was the Dallas Cowgirls taking home the division crown at 12-5 last year. But again, no repeat champion since 2004. So that would suggest potentially, if you believe this trend, that the Eagles, Giants, or Commanders could swoop in here and take the division crown here in the 2024 campaign. So first up here, let's talk about the Dallas Cowgirls, okay? Because this is a team that I think has probably gotten worse heading into this season compared to where they were last year, okay? Their head coach is still Mike McCarthy, but he is still definitely on the hot seat after some really, really poor performances in the playoffs as of late. This team is really successful in the regular season, but they've taken some really tough losses in the postseason, and this is a team and an owner in Jerry Jones that's definitely going to want to win in the postseason moving forward, so the pressure is definitely on. The offensive scheme that they run is kind of a hybrid between the modern pro spread stuff that we see around the league and the West Coast stuff that we see in the Shanahan tree. So McCarthy definitely runs everything under the sun, and last year they actually had a really, really nice scheme under Mike McCarthy that really worked with the personnel that they had. Then on defense, they changed from Dan Quinn, who goes from the Cowboys to the Commanders. We were able to poach him, and they end up hiring Mike Zimmer, who is a longtime Cowboys defensive coordinator. He's been there a long time, for many years. Jerry Jones knows him well, and he runs a 4-2 balance system. So you take a look at some of the key departures here for the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, Dan Quinn left for the Washington Commanders. They lost Tony Pollard, which in my opinion is a pretty big loss, especially because they didn't really replace him this year with anybody that I think is any good. Tyron Smith, their left tackle, left. Tyler Biotish, their starting center, left. The Commanders poached both Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler Jr., their rotational edge rushers. Stephon Gilmore left this offseason. And then Leighton Vander Esch, Jonathan Hankins, and Sam Williams. Sam Williams is actually hurt. It's not a true departure, but he will not be on the field for the Cowboys this year. Then we get to the additions here, and honestly, I'm not too sure if they did a great job replacing the talents that they lost, right? You get Mike Zimmer, who in my opinion is a lower level defensive play caller at this point in his career than Dan Quinn. At the running back position, you bring in two guys that are completely cooked in Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook, in my opinion. You draft a guy in Tyler Guyton to be your starting left tackle. The reports out of training camp are pretty good on Guyton, but honestly, looking at his college film, I wasn't very high on Tyler coming out in the draft this year. They also get Cooper Beebe and Marshawn Nealon and Kalen Carson, so three players that I really liked in the draft this year. And then they traded for Andrew Booth Jr., but I really do not expect anything out of him. So my take on the Dallas Cowboys is that this is still a good team. I mean, Dak Prescott, I think, is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in football, even though I hate his guts. And then you got CeeDee Lamb, who in my opinion was the offensive player of the year. He had that good of a season. And of course, he just signed that mega contract to come back to the Cowboys. They still have Micah Parsons. They still have DeMarcus Lawrence. They still have Trayvon Diggs, who's coming back from his injury from last season. So they still have a lot of high caliber talent on this team, but I do think they got worse overall as a roster. They lost Dan Quinn, who I think was a very valuable defensive play caller for them. So I think they'll still be good, but I think they will take a step backwards. Probably still a playoff team in the NFC this year, but I think probably another one-and-done exit in the postseason, leading to Mike McCarthy getting fired. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. Do you think Mike McCarthy will get fired by the Dallas Cowboys either during or after the 2024 NFL season? Give me a yes or a no for today's pinned comment. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. And also, we're going to be talking about our sponsor at Factor Meals. Well, I'm talking about Factor here. Find that pinned comment at the top of the comment section and give me a yes already know. Now let's have a word from our sponsor here at Factor Meals. And with fall right around the corner, fuel up for those crisp autumn weekends with Factor's no prep, no mess meals today. Meet your wellness goals in time for fall thanks to Factor's menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and even Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are this fall, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you guys waiting for? With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore with Factor. Make your day delicious today from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. So you guys can head over to factormeals.com/commanderschat50 and use code commanderschat50. It's right down there in the bottom of your screen right now to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. So that's code commanderschat50 at factormeals.com/commanderschat50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is still active. A big thank you to Factor Meals for sponsoring today's edition of the Commanders Report. So now let's talk about those birds in Philadelphia, man. We all know how terrible Philly fans are. But listen, man, could this be the beginning of the end of the Nick Sirianni regime here in Philly? Because last year it seemed like he started to lose that locker room a little bit. Of course, they end up bringing him back after an 11-6 season, plus a one-and-done exit, losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the wild card round of the playoffs. But they fired both of their coordinators. Now Kellen Moore comes in to call the plays on offense. He runs a modern pro spread style of offense, and then they bring in the godfather of the quarters revolution here in the National Football League, and Vic Fangio himself to call the defense. So a couple of key departures here. They did lose Brian Johnson, who is now with the Commander staff, who was their offensive coordinator last year. They kind of switched defensive coordinators mid-season last year with Sean Desai, replacing him with Matt Patricia. Both of those guys are gone. Plus, they lose Jason Kelsey to retirement, Hassan Reddick in a trade to the Jets, DeAndre Swift, their starting running back, to Chicago, and then Fletcher Cox ended up retiring as well. And then some really key additions. They really spent a lot, and they went out and got a lot of pieces here during the offseason. They got a new OC and a new DC, as we discussed. They got Saquon Barkley, who I think is an upgrade over DeAndre Swift at this point. Maybe not a huge upgrade, but definitely an upgrade. They get Bryce Huff, a really good edge rusher, formerly with the Jets. Isaiah Rodgers, a speed demon at corner. Quinn Mitchell is their first-round pick. He was my number 1 rated corner. I think he's going to have a really, really special NFL career. And then you get Cooper DeJean in that trade up with Washington in the second round, actually. Not the best preseason for him, but I do think he has a bright future. You do bring back C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Devin White, and Zach Bond. Not my favorite inside linebackers in the world, but they did bring them in, and they will start for them this year. Then Mekhi Becton, formerly a tackle, will be playing on the interior for them at right guard this year. And then, of course, the Commanders traded Jahan Dotson to them just a couple weeks ago, or last week, I should say. So my take on the Philadelphia Eagles as a whole is that they have the best roster in this division, in my opinion. Now, Nick Sirianni, if he's not a legitimate head coach and he continues to lose the locker room, that relationship with Jalen Hurts continues to devolve. Perhaps this is a team that could underperform, but in terms of the coordinators they have in there, in terms of the roster talent that they have no excuse not to be one of the favorites in the NFC this year and probably the favorites in this division this year. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comments section. Will the Philadelphia Eagles continue their spiral downwards, or will they bounce back here in 2024? Let me know what you guys are thinking on the Birds down there in the comments section. Now, last but and probably least in this division, if we're being honest, guys, it is the New York Football Giants. And, plain and simply, I think that this team took a really big step back last year. I think everybody knows this. A 6-11 season. Daniel Jones didn't play well, and then he got hurt. They had injuries on the offensive line. It wasn't good for head coach Brian Dable, who I am a big fan of. I think that his Earnhardt Perkins style of offense, I think it's, it's gritty. He's put his own modern twist on on it. I really like Brian Dable as an offensive play caller, but him and Wink Martindale as the old defensive coordinator had a big falling out. They brought in a Belichick disciple here in Shane Bowen, formerly the DC with the Tennessee Titans, which I thought was a pretty darn good hire. So we take a look at the key departures. Mike Kafka is still the offensive coordinator, but he's no longer calling plays. Wink Martindale ended up going to the University of Michigan. Saquon Barkley, they end up losing him to the division rival Eagles. Leonard Williams and Darren Waller, both of those guys are no longer with the team. A'Shaun Robinson went to the Carolina Panthers. Adoree Jackson and Mark Lewinsky are two guys that really didn't have good seasons last year, still currently free agents. Ben Bredeson went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then Tyrod Taylor, their backup quarterback, that I think was probably their best quarterback last year, ended up leaving for the New York Jets to be Aaron Rodgers' backup. And my take overall on the New York Giants is that I really don't like their quarterback situation. I mean, Daniel Jones was arguably the worst starting quarterback in the National Football League that started week 1 last year. And then I'm not a big believer in Drew Lock as well. Tommy DeVito is what he is. And, I think that the overall roster, it's young. There's a lot of players on here that absolutely need to get established as talents. Deonte Banks, Malik Neighbors, they got a lot of young talents. So maybe they're a year away. Maybe they're 2 years away. I am a believer in Brian Dable, but I probably think this team is going to stink once again. So let me know down there in the comments section, will the Giants draft in the top 5 of the 2025 NFL draft? Let me know what you guys are thinking down there in the comments section. Personally, guys, I think they're probably going to be drafting top 5 once again. So now let's talk a little bit about how the Washington Commanders stack up with the rest of these teams in the NFC East as we approach the 2024 season. And, I think that there's 4 major categories that you really want to look at when you compare yourself to the other teams in your division. That's coaching staff, that's quarterback, that's offense, and that's defense. And honestly, guys, I actually think the Commanders have the best coaching staff in the division. Now, obviously, Dan Quinn needs to reestablish himself as a legitimate head coach in this league. But, I'm not the biggest fan overall of the Cowboys staff with Mike McCarthy. I'm not the biggest fan of Nick Sirianni as a team leader, if I'm being honest with you. And then I think there's definitely some question marks on the coaching staff of the New York Giants right now as well. So right now, I love the energy that I'm seeing. I'm loving everything that I'm seeing from this Washington Commanders coaching staff. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say they have the number 1 unit in the division. And then quarterback, offense, and defense, I have them 3rd in all of those categories, with the Giants being last in all of those categories, in my opinion. I do think that this team in Washington is still probably a year away. I think with the behavior of GM Adam Peters and head coach Dan Quinn, it definitely seems like this is going to be a foundational year. Get Jayden Daniels' feet wet, establish your culture, all that great stuff. You're probably not going to expect, double-digit wins out of this season if you're the Commanders, but you're going to want to see competitiveness. You're going to want to see buy-in from all the people in that locker room so that they can really load up in 2025 to truly become NFC East and NFL competitors here, trying to go out and win a Lombardi Trophy here in Washington. So my official NFC East prediction here is I do think Philly will take the number 1 spot, or at least they should. They have the best overall roster. If Nick Sirianni isn't a complete fraud, that team will likely win the division this year. I still think Dallas is a good football team, even though they will take a step backwards. Washington, I think, will maybe overperform based on what their roster talent is right now. The offensive line isn't great. The cornerback room isn't great, but I think Dan Quinn and this culture and Jayden Daniels gets this team to at least 7 wins and hopefully up to like 9 wins. That'd be awesome. And then I think the New York Giants will be basement dwellers here. They're going to be locked down there for the entire 2024 season as far as I'm concerned. So now it's your turn. Let me know down there in the comments section, where will the Commanders finish in the NFC East? Do you agree with me with 3rd? Do you think that they might sneak into the playoffs with a number 2 spot? Do you think they can win the division? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section, and don't forget to tell me your reasons why. All right, guys, that'll be it for today's show. I really do appreciate all of your support. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. And until next time, hail to the Commanders.